Chapter 22. They had left the gold Newman. Layla twirled the large round coin between her fingers, slurping stew and munching on meat and bread from the night before. After a little while, she was, for the second time in as many days, full. Her body was a wreck of mixed emotions, a blur of contradictions, her belly filled with stew that she had slurped through lips so cracked from the cold they bled. Her ears rang and her head pounded like she had spent the previous day downing mugs in the downwind, though her throat felt as if she hadn't had a drink in days. No noise stemmed from inside the home. No stirring, no snoring, no pattering of paws on the floorboard. Even the crackling of fire was gone, along with the heat. The Ricker house was silent, all except the hissing wind and the chatter of thoughts in Layla's head. How could thoughts be so loud? The only noise to keep her company was the faint sounds drifting in from outside. Muffled but present, the rumble of voices, the rattling of cartwheels, the thudding of 100 boot steps. But those were out there, and they gave Layla little comfort. She would have thought the gold in her hand would have been comforting, but it only made her colder. A gold Newman. Freedom, Layla thought. That's what this is, ain't it? She could go anywhere she wanted, could pack up her things and leave before this supposed attack. Go north. See Sheraton, and then on to Damare. Names she had only heard about, dreamed about, but now there were places that she could go. For the first time in her life, she had options. She could travel, see the sister mountains, pay one of the Meifa to teach her to read. To read. She had to leave, to pack up and start out, to go and not look back. The roads weren't an option, of course. Even when monsters of legend weren't on the horizon, it was dangerous to be a lone girl on the road. But she could stay off the main road, cross the countryside, and sleep beneath the stars. There was a monastery only a week's march away, she thought. The priests had visited Watchful, spinning tales of Deos and of Trevelar's past. They would take her in for the winter. Then, after the snow thawed, she could move on. Maybe she could see the whole of Lazarus. Layla stood, looking toward her boots tucked beneath the cot, their laces visible in a streak of dust-filled sunlight. "Oh, I should go," she said the words aloud, her throat so dry she coughed. Then she said the words again, trying them out as if breathing them into the air could make them real. "I should go." And she should, shouldn't she? What kept her here? Her mother and her brother had left. They were gone, and if time had taught her anything, they wouldn't be coming back. They would probably die in the wood. But even if they did return to Watchful, could Layla stand to see how wrecked they would be? When Oli had returned from that last God-forsaken errand with their father, he had come back broken. Layla couldn't see that again, and she couldn't watch it happen to her mother. And besides, if the Yelmes had returned, and if they were going to attack Watchful, then wouldn't she just die here? She wanted nothing to do with a war, let alone one with the monsters from the west. All she had to do was leave. But leaving felt so final. Orelda and Oli Ricker weren't dead yet. Or maybe they were and Layla didn't know it. It tortured her, having her family both alive and dead in her own mind. If she left, would she be only acknowledging what was already happened? Or giving up on the only family that she had left? Her grandparents had died long before she was born. Her mother had no siblings, and her father wasn't from Watchful. Layla had no one except her mother and brother. But they had left. Layla squeezed the coin in her palm so hard it hurt, squinting her eyes to keep back tears. Whatever this moment was, it wasn't the time to cry. She needed to make a decision, do something, anything. A bang at the door shook Layla from her reverie, and she dropped the gold coin. It tumbled to the floor and settled with the visage of the woman's face, looking up at Layla with a disappointed stare. Deus, help me, Layla murmured. Deus, help me, Layla murmured, as she stood, legs shaking from both the cold and the shock. The pounding came at the door again, this time accompanied by a male voice calling out, Layla, are you in there? Are you all right? Layla closed her eyes and muttered a curse. The voice was too familiar. She grabbed the Newman from the ground, dropped it in her pocket, then glanced up toward the ceiling. You have got to be joking. No answer came from the rafters, only more knocking from the door. Layla, I know you're in there. I heard something. What was that? Are you all right? She sighed and strained her dress, running her fingers quickly through her hair as she stepped toward the door. She thought about reaching for a knife, but today was probably a bad day to stab someone. She had enough problems. She slid back the rusty locking bolt, then flung open the front door swift enough. The hinges hardly had enough time to let out their customary scream. And there he was, Winston Tote. He stood before her, fist ready to bang on wood, mouth halfway open to call out her name again. His face, normally so carefully manicured and presentable, looked as if it had been played the part of an anvil for the smithy. One eye had swollen shut, rings of black and blue forming around it. His cheek and lip looked inflamed, red, and lumpy. Oi, Layla said with a nod. You talked to my brother, then? Winston stepped back. Yes, well, he isn't here, is he? He winced as he spoke, as if certain words forced his mouth into painful positions. Don't think that's any of your business, eh? Now tell me, what is it you want so bad? And you can be off. Winston worked his jaw the way he did when frustration nagged at him, which made him wince again and then curse. I've come to get you. We're all leaving, and you should be coming too. Layla caught whiffs of thyme on his breath, as if he'd been trying to freshen up before seeing her. She laughed. What are you talking about? I ain't going nowhere with everyone is leaving. To prove his point, Winston stepped aside and gestured to the street. He wasn't joking. Most of the town had crowded into one tangled line that streamed down the hill at a shuffle. Hand carts were filled with children and bags. People shoved and yelled, and every face that she saw looked angry and afraid. What? Was all Layla could think to say. My father's orders. We're making for the south. South? What's south? Antaron. Father sent a runner on ahead to let them know we were coming. Winter comes later in the south, so if we hurry, we may beat the snowfall. But we spotted the Yelmas. Layla met his eyes. He had said the words seriously, deliberately. Somehow, Layla understood that he had spotted the Yelmas. From the top of the hill, they could see for miles, so the hilltoppers would have been the first to see them. And that meant they were real. Actual monsters from legend stalked the hills near her home. The realization made her heart skip, and she put a hand toward the wall, breathing deep. She hadn't believed, not until this moment. Her mind had understood, but understanding and belief were not the same thing. Not until that moment had she actually believed demons were coming. How long? She said, her voice fading to a whisper. What? Layla swallowed. How long until, you know? Winston ran his hand through his hair. How should I know? How should anyone know? Hours, days, it doesn't matter. We won't be here. Pack your things and come on. Immediately, irritation replaced all of Layla's fears. Oi! You don't tell me what to do, Winston Tote. If I want to leave, I'll do it without you. Don't be a fool. Winston stepped forward, pushing past Layla into the house. Layla's jaw dropped, her face burning. He was in her home. Her home. Get out, she said, fingers extending to the street. Winston shook his head as he looked around, eyes fixing on a large satchel hanging from a rusty hook. It was decorative and had been there for as long as Layla could remember. One of the knickknacks from her father's travels, adorning the Ricker cottage. And then Winston grabbed it and began indiscriminately stuffing clothes and sheets into it, while shaking his head. I will not. He picked up a shirt. Leave you. He shoved the shirt into the bag. To die. Get out, Layla said again, mind frantic. Her head grew light and her feet heavy. Winston stomped his foot and turned toward her, bruised face scrunched and angry. Why do you put me off? You belong with me. I'm trying to save you. He shouted the words, and Layla stepped back, hip touching the bookcase. Get out, she said again, her voice quieter this time. Winston dropped the bag, keeping his eyes locked firmly on her. He stepped forward, shaking his head. No. Layla swallowed, moving one hand onto the bookcase, fingers feeling about for something, anything, but she found only pieces of parchment and old books. Winston stepped toward her again, looking away to peer out into the street. His eyes narrowed on something, and then he leaned over and grabbed the handle of the door, slamming it closed. And then Layla's mind went blank. This was bad. She knew this was bad. Why won't you let me save you? The words slid from Winston's lips like oil, quiet and dangerous. Layla said nothing, mouth opening and closing. You're leaving, Layla, with me. And then he slid the bolt of the door closed. The ringing of metal as the latch caught and locked was like the shattering of glass. She couldn't breathe. You need to see that I am trying to help you. I am here for you. He stepped within arm's reach, his chest dominating her vision. I didn't need to come. I could have let you stay here, could have let you burn at the hands of monsters, but I came to save you. And what do? Winston slammed his fist on the door, his voice rising over the banging wood. You push me away. Get out. Layla hardly said the words in her mind, let alone out loud. They were a whisper. Get out. Is that all you can say? Winston reached toward her shoulders, his hand suddenly seeming like the mandible of the creature from her nightmare. Layla shoved herself away from the bookcase, slapping Winston's hand away. Just get out, Winston, now or what? My brother... Layla backed into the kitchen table so hard it toppled over, and she fell right alongside the dirty plates and fork that she had left there. She rolled to her butt, scooting backward as Winston walked closer. Your brother is in the wood and on a fool's errand. Winston shook his head and stepped forward, kneeling down towards her, reaching his hand out, every finger seeming ready to devour her. Layla kicked. She didn't think, just brought her knee up to her chest and slammed her heel into Winston's face as hard as she could. He toppled backwards, screaming and flailing, curses flowing like blood from his lips. Layla scrambled to her feet, rushing toward the fireplace and the small clay jar beside it that held the half-dozen kitchen utensils the Ricker family owned. Witch! Winston cried, his boots pounding on the floor behind Layla. Make her help you all. Layla reached out and grabbed a worn wooden handle sticking up from the clay jar. When she spun, the jar flew from the shelf and shattered on the ground, but her hand held fast to the handle of a long cooking knife. Winston moved fast, his face a blur of spittle and blood as he reached out his hand towards her. That hand filled her vision, and she swung the knife, feeling it catch and land between his fingers, slicing down toward his palm. Blood, then screaming, then Winston's body crashed into her. Out of control, he yelled and writhed in pain. His shoulder hit Layla's chest, slamming her back into the stone of the fireplace and kicking the breath from her lungs. They fell into the warm embers of the fireplace, soot and ash exploding beneath their writhing bodies. Layla tried to push Winston off, but he only pushed her harder into the ground. She caught a glimpse of his eyes, bloodshot to the point of inhuman. She felt his hand on her chest. She went to swing her knife again, but her hand was empty. The knife had dropped from her hand in the fall. She felt around on the floor, trying to track down the wooden handle again, but Winston thrashed about as he tried to control his pain and anger. He tried to get to his knees while keeping her pinned to the ground, the weight of him suffocating on her chest. Soot shot into the air, but though it filled her lungs, it didn't drown out the scent of time. Layla pushed at his chest, shoulders, and head, but he ignored her. She squirmed but couldn't get him off. Breathing became harder as she drowned beneath his weight and anger. Her back lit up in pain, her chest compressed. Her mouth tried and failed to suck in air. And then his eyes locked onto her again, staring death and possession into her. She decided she didn't need a knife, and so she lashed her hands out and stabbed her fingers into those eyes, hard enough to draw blood. Winston screamed and reared back off of her. She could breathe again. She made to stand, but before she could, the door of the home cracked and shattered open, light pouring in. "What's going on?" A soldier stood in the doorway, the royal orange tunic like sunrise. The door's latch was bent, the wood of the doorframe broken. Hands shaking, body shaking, Layla scrambled to her feet, eyes moving between Winston and the soldier. The newcomer was a man, maybe twice her age, his hand on the pommel of his sword. He looked from Layla to Winston, then said, "Tote, is that you?" Winston looked up, face covered in sweat, soot, and blood. "Captain, thank Deus. This wench tried to kill me." The captain looked about the cottage, taking in the table, the sheets Winston had scattered about in his mad dash to pack her bag, and then he looked Layla up and down. "You the Riker girl?" She swallowed spit, praying her fear would go down with it, but it didn't. She met the captain's eyes as best she could and stammered out, "Aye, I am, and who's asking?" The man let out a dark, low laugh. "Aye, you're her sister, all right." To Winston, he said, "Get up, Tote. I don't have time for you." Tears streamed from Winston as he got to his knees, bloody hands clenched to his chest. But she, the captain removed the sword from its sheath. It reminded her of Ollie sliding an arrow from his quiver. It was a practiced, determined motion, something done by a man who had used the blade before and knew what he was doing now. Winston's voice cut off into a pained whimper. "Do you know what the punishment is for rape?" the captain asked. Winston said nothing. "It's death, Tote. And here, on the eve of battle, as the officer in command of this forsaken dung heap of a town, I have no courtly obligation to give you a trial. Do you understand me?" Winston stood, still hunched. He nodded twice, though it may have been a mere twitching from pain. The captain took a step away from the door, moving himself between Layla and Winston. "Then leave before I reconsider." Winston fled out of the house, shouting for people to move as he turned up the hill. The captain shook his head, sheathing his sword. "Well, Miss Riker," he said, twisting about and stepping back from Layla. His palms were open, an annoying and obnoxious way of making himself look less threatening. "If there is anything I can—" "I'm fine," she snapped. He paused, looking ready to say more until he settled for scratching his chin. "Well then, good day, I suppose." He turned, but Layla stepped forward. "Oi, you didn't tell me who's asking." "Excuse me. Who are you?" He turned back and gave a small bow of his head. "Captain Ronald Thibault." Layla ran her shaking hand down her skirt, smearing blood. "And how'd you know me, eh? Didn't think I was the type to have a soldier knocking on my door." Thibault looked at the open front door, which swayed back and forth. "Mr. Tote tried to get me involved in his feud with your brother yesterday. I understood something about unquenched love for a sister, and," the captain shrugged, "I deduced the rest when I entered." "And you make a habit of barging into people's homes, breaking latches and all?" Layla wrapped her arms around herself. Everything felt colder than before, and her shoulders shivered. And what was she doing? She should have been grateful. Should have been thanking this man for saving her from Winston. She didn't feel thankful. She felt angry and scared, and she wanted to throw something, hit something. Thibault smiled, and Layla wanted to smack him. "I was looking for Tote and caught sight of him before he closed the door. I prayed he could convince his father to call off this stupid exodus before they get everyone killed when I heard the clatter. I didn't bother to knock." "Well," Layla said, and then said nothing else. "Well, what? Thank you. Don't come into my house again. Please leave." What could she say? "Well, indeed. If you need anything else. If you need nothing else, I'll be going." He'd nearly gotten to the door when Layla burst out, Can you tell me I won't die if I stay here?" She sucked in air, voice shaking. Why shouldn't I leave? Thibault looked at her in the eye, working his jaw thoughtfully. Here in this town is a candle of hope, Miss Riker. A fighting chance. On the roads and fields outside, there will be no survivors. He looked around the cottage and the trail of desperate destruction. Go to the downwind and get a blade. Help us hold out until the princess returns, until your brother returns. I don't want to fight. I just want to live. I just want to be safe and alone. And Layla bit her tongue, blinking to force the tears backwards. Me too. But war has come to Trevelar, Miss Riker. It has come here to your quiet stretch of earth. And I am sorry, truly. But if you want peace, if any of us wants peace, then we had best be prepared to fight for it. That don't make no sense. You can't fight for peace. Thibault smiled sadly. None of it makes sense anymore. And then he turned and walked away, and Layla was alone.